Welcome to our channel. Where are you watching from? Please subscribe and let's dive in. The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast delicate shadows across the mahogany surface as I sat across from my son Marcus and his wife, Victoria. It was supposed to be a celebration dinner, a quiet family gathering to mark Marcus's promotion to senior partner at his law firm. But the air felt thick with tension, the kind that settles over a room when unspoken words hang heavier than any conversation. Victoria dabbed the corner of her mouth with her linen napkin, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light. Everything about her screamed refinement and old money, from her designer dress to the way she held her wine glass. She had been raised in the Ashford family, one of the most prominent names in our city's business circles, and she never let anyone forget it. "So, Margaret," Victoria said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that barely masked condescension, "Marcus tells me you've been dabbling in some sort of investment lately." I felt my spine stiffen slightly, but I kept my expression neutral. "Yes, I have. It's been quite exciting, actually." She let out a delicate laugh that sounded more like a dismissive tinkle. "How charming. What is it? Some little boutique stock? A small rental property?" Her eyes gleamed with barely concealed amusement. "I do think it's adorable when people try their hand at investing at your age. It keeps the mind sharp, doesn't it?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Victoria, Mom's always been smart with money." "Oh, darling, I'm not saying she isn't," Victoria interrupted, placing her hand on his arm possessively. "I just think it's sweet. My father always says that small investments are wonderful learning experiences. Everyone has to start somewhere, right, Margaret?" The condescension in her tone was unmistakable now. I'd dealt with people like Victoria my entire life, people who assumed that because I lived modestly and didn't flaunt wealth, I must not have any. People who judged a book by its cover and found themselves perpetually surprised when they finally read the first page. "It's been quite educational," I said carefully, taking a sip of my water. Victoria leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Margaret, if you need any advice, I'm sure my father would be happy to help. Richard Ashford has been in high-level finance for over 40 years. He could probably point you towards something more substantial than whatever little venture you've gotten yourself into." I felt the familiar burn of frustration rising in my chest, but I'd learned long ago that patience was a virtue, especially when dealing with people who underestimated you. "That's very kind of you to offer, Victoria." "Think nothing of it," she waved her hand dismissively. "Family helps family, even with their small endeavors. I mean, at least you're trying to do something productive with your time. That's more than I can say for some people your age who just sit around and watch television all day." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Mom runs a very successful—" "Marcus, darling, I'm complimenting your mother," Victoria said with a patronizing smile. "There's no need to be defensive. I think it's absolutely wonderful that she's keeping herself occupied." The dinner continued in much the same vein, with Victoria making subtle jabs wrapped in false sweetness, each comment designed to diminish and belittle what she assumed was my cute little investment project. I let her talk, responding with polite nods and noncommittal phrases. There was no point in correcting her assumptions. People like Victoria only believed what they could see with their own eyes, and sometimes not even then. After dinner, as I was preparing to leave, Victoria hugged me with the kind of embrace that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. "It was lovely seeing you, Margaret. And really, don't hesitate to reach out if you need any guidance with your investment. We wouldn't want you to lose your savings on something risky." I smiled and thanked her for her concern, then kissed Marcus goodbye. As I drove home to my modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, I thought about the contrast between appearances and reality. Victoria saw a woman in her 60s living in a middle-class home, driving a reliable but unremarkable car, and shopping at regular grocery stores. What she didn't see was the careful strategy behind every decision I'd made for the past 40 years. My late husband, David, and I had never been interested in flashy displays of wealth. We'd both grown up during harder times, and we understood the value of every dollar. When David worked as an engineer and I ran my small accounting firm, we lived well below our means. We saved, we invested wisely, and we built something substantial. Not for show, but for security and freedom. The small investment Victoria had mocked with such amusement? It was anything but small. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Marcus, and his voice carried an edge of urgency I rarely heard. "Mom, are you sitting down?" "I'm in my garden, dear." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just. Victoria's father called me this morning. He wants to have dinner with us. All of us. Including you." I paused, my gardening gloves still covered in soil. "Richard Ashford wants to have dinner with me?" "That's what Victoria said." She seemed really confused about it too. "Her father specifically requested your presence. He said it was important." "Did he say what it was about?" "No, but he was insistent." "Can you make it Friday night?" 7 o'clock at the Sterling? The Sterling was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, the kind of place where reservations had to be made months in advance. "Of course I can make it." "Great. I'll let Victoria know." "Mom, is there something going on that I should know about?" I smiled to myself. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. I'll see you Friday." The days leading up to Friday passed with curious anticipation. I knew exactly why Richard Ashford wanted to see me, and I had a feeling that dinner was going to be very interesting indeed. Friday evening arrived, and I dressed carefully in an elegant navy dress that I'd been saving for a special occasion. Nothing too flashy, but well-made and tasteful. When I arrived at the Sterling, the maitre d' greeted me by name and led me to a private dining room where Marcus, Victoria, and Richard Ashford were already seated. Richard stood immediately when I entered. He was a tall, distinguished man in his late 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that had evaluated countless business deals over the decades. "Margaret," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you so much for coming." "It's my pleasure, Richard," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Victoria looked between her father and me with barely concealed confusion. She'd clearly expected her father to treat me with the same polite condescension she did, but his warmth and respect were unmistakable. We settled into our seats, and after some initial pleasantries and ordering our meals, Richard cleared his throat. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I requested this dinner." "It has been on my mind," I admitted with a slight smile. Richard chuckled. "I imagine it has. Victoria, Marcus, there's something I need to discuss with you both, and it involves Margaret." He turned his full attention to his daughter. "Victoria, you mentioned to me last week that Margaret had made some sort of small investment that you found. How did you put it? Charming?" Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly. "Daddy, I was just making conversation. You told me that Marcus's mother was playing around with some cute little investment project," Richard continued, his tone gentle but firm. "You suggested that I might offer her some advice, given my experience in finance." "I was trying to be helpful," Victoria said defensively, glancing at Marcus for support. "I'm sure you thought you were," Richard said. "But here's the thing, sweetheart. Before I offer anyone financial advice, I make it my business to understand their current position. So I did a little research." He pulled out a leather folder from beside his chair and opened it. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind, but I made some inquiries through my network. Nothing invasive, just professional curiosity." "I don't mind at all," I said calmly. Richard looked at Victoria and Marcus. What I discovered was quite remarkable. "Margaret, would you like to tell them, or should I?" I took a sip of my wine. "Why don't you tell them, Richard? You'll probably explain it better than I would." He nodded and turned to his daughter and son-in-law. "Your mother, Marcus, doesn't have a small investment. What she has is a substantial portfolio that would make most professional investors envious." He adjusted his reading glasses and looked at the papers in front of him. Margaret, I hope you'll forgive me for being specific, but I think it's important that they understand. Please, go ahead, I encouraged. Approximately 30 years ago, Margaret and her late husband David began investing in various technology companies that were just emerging. They had the foresight to recognize potential in companies that most people dismissed as risky or unproven. Does the name Apex Technologies mean anything to you, Victoria? Victoria's face went pale. Apex Technologies was one of the most successful tech companies in the world, having revolutionized cloud computing and artificial intelligence. Of course it does. Margaret was one of their earliest investors. She bought shares when the company was operating out of a garage with 6 employees. Richard smiled at me with genuine admiration. She also invested early in several other companies that became industry leaders. But that's not all. Tell me, Margaret, when did you start your real estate ventures? About 25 years ago, I replied. David and I saw that the downtown area was being revitalized. We purchased several properties when prices were still reasonable. Several properties, Richard repeated. Victoria, your mother-in-law owns 12 commercial properties in the downtown district, including the building that houses 3 Fortune 500 company offices. She also owns residential properties in 4 different states. Marcus's mouth had fallen open. Victoria looked like she'd been struck by lightning. But that's not what prompted me to call this dinner, Richard continued. What caught my attention was something more recent. Margaret, you've made a significant investment in green energy systems, haven't you? I have, I confirmed. About 18 months ago. Richard laughed and shook his head. Green Energy Systems is the company I've been trying to buy into for the past year. It's a sustainable energy startup that's about to go public, and early projections suggest it's going to be one of the most successful IPOs of the decade. Margaret managed to secure a substantial stake before most major investors even knew it existed. He leaned back in his chair and looked at his daughter. Victoria, when you told me about your mother-in-law's small investment, I assumed it was perhaps a few $1,000s in a mutual fund or a small rental property. What I discovered is that Margaret's investment portfolio is worth approximately $47 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face had gone from pale to completely white. Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been hurt. Mom, Marcus said quietly, why didn't you ever tell me? I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Because it wasn't important for you to know, sweetheart. Your father and I raised you to make your own way in the world, to work hard and build your own success. We never wanted you to rely on our money or feel entitled to it. We wanted you to be proud of what you achieved on your own. But $47 million. Marcus breathed. Is just a number, I said gently. It doesn't change who I am or who you are. You became a senior partner at your firm through your own talent and hard work, not because of any money your father and I had. That's something to be genuinely proud of. Victoria finally found her voice. I don't understand. You live in such a modest house. You drive a Toyota. You shop at regular stores. Why would you live like that if you have that much money? Because a bigger house wouldn't make me happier, I explained patiently. An expensive car wouldn't get me where I need to go any better than my reliable Toyota. Designer clothes wouldn't make me a better person. Your father understands this, Victoria. Real wealth isn't about what you display, it's about freedom and security and being able to help the people you care about when they truly need it. Richard nodded approvingly. Margaret's right. I've met countless people over the years who looked wealthy but were drowning in debt, and I've met people like Margaret who lived modestly but had more real wealth than 100 flashy spenders combined. True financial wisdom isn't about spending money, it's about growing it and using it purposefully. Victoria looked down at her plate, her face burning with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I was incredibly condescending and rude. I made assumptions about you based on appearances, and I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool," I said kindly. "You're young, and you were raised in a world where wealth is often displayed rather than quietly maintained. This is a learning moment, not a judgment." "I was so arrogant," Victoria whispered. "Going on about my father's expertise and offering to have him give you advice, when all along, I should have been asking Margaret for advice," Richard interjected with a warm smile. "Margaret, I meant what I said earlier. I've been trying to get into green energy for a year." "How did you even hear about them?" I took a sip of my wine before answering. "Do you remember a young woman named Sarah who worked at your firm about 3 years ago?" Richard thought for a moment. "Sarah, yes, brilliant analyst. She left to pursue some entrepreneurial venture, if I recall correctly." "That's the one. Sarah and I met at a charity fundraiser, and we struck up a friendship. She has a gift for identifying emerging technologies, particularly in sustainable energy. When she mentioned green energy systems and explained their innovative approach to solar panel efficiency, I did my own research and decided to invest. I also helped Sarah secure some initial funding for her own consulting firm." "Sarah," Richard repeated, pulling out his phone. "I should reach out to her. That kind of insight is exactly what my firm needs." "She's doing very well," I said. "Her client list includes several Fortune 500 companies now. I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you." The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had completely transformed. Richard asked me thoughtful questions about my investment strategy and the principles that had guided my decisions over the years. Marcus looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. And Victoria? Victoria was quiet, processing the magnitude of her misconceptions. As dessert was being served, Victoria suddenly spoke up. "Margaret, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why green energy? Out of all the possible investments you could have made, why did you choose that particular company?" It was a good question, and I appreciated that she was trying to understand rather than just sitting in her embarrassment. "2 reasons," I said. "First, because the technology they're developing has the potential to make sustainable energy accessible to communities that currently can't afford it. That matters to me. Second, because the 3 founders are all women under 35 who had been told by countless investors that they were too young and inexperienced to succeed. I believed in their vision, and I wanted to support them." Richard smiled broadly. "And that's the difference between good investors and great ones. Good investors look at numbers and projections. Great investors look at people and purpose. Margaret, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening," I said. "My firm is establishing an impact investment division, focusing on companies that prioritize both profit and social good. Would you be interested in joining our advisory board? I think your perspective would be invaluable." I considered the offer carefully. "I'm flattered, Richard. Let me think about it and get back to you." "Of course. Take all the time you need." He raised his glass. "In the meantime, I'd like to propose a toast. To Margaret, a woman of wisdom, discretion, and remarkable financial acumen. And to learning that we should never judge a book by its cover." We all raised our glasses, and I caught Victoria's eye. She mouthed "I'm sorry" once more, and I gave her a warm smile in return. After dinner, as we were preparing to leave, Victoria pulled me aside. "Margaret, I need to apologize again. I was awful to you at dinner last week, and I've probably been condescending in countless other ways that I'm only now recognizing. I don't have any excuse except my own arrogance and stupidity." "Victoria," I said gently, taking her hands in mine, "we all make mistakes, especially when we're young. What matters is what we do after we realize we've made them. You're a smart woman, and I can see that you're reflecting on this seriously. That's growth, and growth is always worth celebrating. How can you be so kind after how I treated you?" Because holding grudges is exhausting, and life is too short to waste energy on negativity. Besides, I see how happy you make my son, and that matters more to me than a few thoughtless comments. Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes. Thank you. I promise I'll do better. And, would you maybe be willing to have coffee with me sometime? I'd really like to get to know you better. The real you, not the version I made up in my head. I'd like that very much, I said warmly. As Marcus drove me home that night, he was unusually quiet. Finally, as we pulled into my driveway, he turned to me. Mom, are you disappointed in me? Disappointed? Why would I be disappointed in you? Because I never asked about your finances. I never showed interest in your investments or what you were doing. I just accepted Victoria's assumptions without questioning them. Marcus, look at me, I said firmly. He turned, and I could see the genuine distress in his eyes. You are not responsible for anyone's assumptions, including your wife's. And I never wanted you to focus on my money or my investments. I wanted you to focus on building your own life, your own success. And you've done that beautifully. I'm incredibly proud of the man you've become. But I could have learned so much from you. All these years, you were this investing genius, and I never even knew. And that's exactly how I wanted it, I said with a smile. If you'd known about the money, it might have changed how you approached your own career and life. You might have felt entitled to it or dependent on it. Instead, you worked hard, you earned your position, and you built something genuine. That's worth more than any amount of money I could have given you. He hugged me tightly. I love you, Mom. And I'm sorry for not defending you better at that dinner last week when Victoria was being condescending. You tried, sweetheart. And honestly, I didn't need defending. I've dealt with people underestimating me my entire life. It's one of the advantages of not flaunting wealth. People reveal who they really are when they think you can't do anything for them. Over the following weeks, things shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. Victoria and I did meet for coffee, and then for lunch, and gradually we developed a genuine friendship. She was eager to learn, asking thoughtful questions about investment strategy, financial planning, and the principles that had guided my decisions. I grew up with money, she told me one afternoon as we sat in my garden, but I realize now that I never really understood it. My parents gave me everything, and I just assumed that wealth was about having things and showing people you had things. I never thought about wealth as a tool or a responsibility. It's both, I said, pruning a rose bush. Money is a tool that can be used to create security, to help others, and to make a positive impact. But it's also a responsibility. Every dollar you have is a dollar you could use to make someone's life better, including your own. Is that why you live the way you do? Simple house, regular car, modest lifestyle? Partly, I admitted. But also because this is genuinely what makes me happy. I love this house. I've lived here for 30 years, and every corner has memories. I love my garden. I love my neighborhood and my neighbors. A mansion would just mean more space I didn't need and more things to maintain. And my Toyota? I laughed. It's reliable, comfortable, and it gets me where I need to go. What more could I want? Victoria smiled. You're teaching me so much, Margaret. I always thought that if I had real wealth, I needed to show it. That it would be somehow dishonest not to display it. Some people do choose to display their wealth, and that's their choice. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, as long as it's not coming from a place of insecurity or a need to feel superior to others. The problem comes when we judge people's worth by their possessions or their displays of wealth. Some of the wealthiest people I've ever met looked completely ordinary. And some of the poorest people I've known put on impressive shows. Our relationship deepened, and I found myself genuinely enjoying Victoria's company. She had a sharp mind and, once she moved past her conditioning, a kind heart. She started volunteering at a financial literacy program for underprivileged teenagers, teaching them basic money management skills. It was beautiful to watch her growth. Marcus, too, began to show more interest in understanding the principles that had guided my investment decisions. We had long talks about risk assessment, patience, research, and the importance of investing in things you believed in rather than just chasing trends. Your grandmother and I used to say that you should invest in companies you'd be proud to own, not just companies you think will make you money, I told him one evening. If the only thing driving your investment is profit, you'll make decisions you might regret. But if you invest in companies doing things you believe in, even if they don't perform exactly as you hoped, you can still feel good about where your money went. About 2 months after the dinner at the Sterling, Richard Ashford called me. Margaret, I've been thinking about the advisory board position. I know you said you'd consider it, but I want to up the ante. What if, instead of just joining the advisory board, you became a founding partner in the impact investment division? You'd have significant input into which projects we take on and how we structure our approach. It was a generous offer, and after some consideration, I accepted. It would mean more work, but it was work I found meaningful. Using wealth to support companies that were trying to make a genuine positive difference in the world aligned perfectly with my values. The Green Energy Systems IPO happened 4 months later, and it was even more successful than Richard had predicted. My initial investment, which had been substantial, increased in value by nearly 300% in the first day of trading. Victoria called me that evening, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Margaret, have you seen the news? Green energy is through the roof. You must be thrilled. It's certainly nice to see the company succeed, I said. But the real victory is what they're doing with that capital. They're going to be able to expand their operations into 3 developing countries, providing affordable solar energy to communities that have never had reliable electricity. That's what makes me happy. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're amazing, you know that? Most people would be celebrating the money, and you're celebrating the impact. The money is just a means to an end, Victoria. The impact is the point. As the year progressed, I found myself busier than I'd been in years. The impact investment division took off, and I worked closely with Richard and his team to evaluate potential investments. We funded a company developing affordable water filtration systems for developing nations. We backed a startup creating educational technology for underprivileged schools. We invested in a women-led business that was revolutionizing sustainable agriculture. Each investment was carefully researched and evaluated not just for financial return but for social impact. It was challenging work, but it was deeply satisfying. Victoria became one of my closest collaborators. She had taken to impact investing with genuine passion, using her considerable networking skills to identify promising companies and connect them with resources. She also became an advocate within her own social circle, gently challenging the conspicuous consumption and status-driven behavior that had once been her norm. One evening, about a year after that pivotal dinner, Marcus and Victoria hosted a party at their home. It was a fundraiser for the financial literacy program Victoria had been working with, and they'd invited a diverse group of people including some of the teenagers from the program, local business leaders, and community activists. I watched Victoria as she moved through the room with confidence and grace, but now there was something different about her. She listened more than she spoke. She asked questions instead of making assumptions. She treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were a CEO or a teenager from a struggling neighborhood. At one point during the evening, one of the teenagers, a sharp young woman named Keisha, approached me. "Are you Mrs. Margaret Harrison?" she asked. "I am." "And you're Keisha, right? Victoria has told me wonderful things about you." Keisha beamed. "Mrs. Victoria has been amazing. She's been teaching me about investing and saving. She told me about you too. About how you built your wealth through smart investing and patient planning." "Did she now?" I said, smiling at Victoria, who was watching us from across the room. She said you're proof that real wealth isn't about looking rich, it's about being smart and purposeful with money. That you can live a simple life and still have financial freedom. Keisha hesitated, then continued. I'm learning so much, and I'm starting to think I could actually build something for myself. Maybe even go to college and study finance. You absolutely could, I encouraged her. With your intelligence and drive, there's no limit to what you can achieve. And if you ever need any guidance or have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Really? You'd do that? Of course. Part of having resources is sharing knowledge with people who can use it to build their own futures. After Keisha walked away, practically glowing with possibility, Victoria came over to me. I saw you talking with Keisha. She's brilliant, isn't she? She is. You've made a real difference in her life, Victoria. Victoria's eyes got a bit misty. I've learned so much from you this past year, Margaret. About wealth, about purpose, about what really matters. I look back at who I was at that dinner when I was mocking your small investment, and I'm embarrassed. But I'm also grateful, because that dinner changed my life. It changed all of our lives, I said gently. Sometimes we need moments of uncomfortable truth to see ourselves clearly and make better choices. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus pulled me aside. Mom, Victoria and I have been talking, and we want to do something. Oh. What's that? We want to set up a scholarship fund. We're calling it the David and Margaret Harrison Fund for Financial Education. It'll provide college scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds who want to study finance or business, and it'll include mentorship from both you and Victoria, if you're willing. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Your father would have loved that. He always believed that education and opportunity could change lives. We've already committed a significant amount to get it started, but we were hoping you might want to contribute as well. Not money, Marcus added quickly. Your time and expertise. We want these students to learn from the best. I would be honored, I said, pulling my son into a hug. That night, driving home through the quiet streets, I thought about the journey of the past year. A simple dinner that was meant to embarrass me had instead become a catalyst for growth, for understanding, and for building something meaningful. Victoria had learned that true wealth wasn't about appearances or superiority. Marcus had learned that his mother's quiet life masked a sophisticated understanding of finance and investment. Richard had found a valuable partner in building a business that prioritized impact alongside profit. And I had learned that sometimes being underestimated created opportunities to teach, to guide, and to help others grow. The green energy systems investment continued to perform exceptionally well. Within 18 months of the IPO, the company had expanded operations into 7 countries and was providing affordable sustainable energy to over 2 million people who had previously lacked reliable electricity. The financial return was substantial, but the social impact was profound. I used a portion of the returns to fund 3 more impact investment projects, to substantially increase my contribution to the scholarship fund Marcus and Victoria had established, and to support Sarah Chen's consulting firm as she expanded into advising developing nations on sustainable energy policy. The rest I saved and continued to invest, following the same principles that had guided me for 40 years: careful research, patient planning, belief in the companies and people I invested in, and a focus on creating value that extended beyond just financial returns. 2 years after that fateful dinner at the Sterling, I received a call from Victoria. Margaret, I need to tell you something. What is it, dear? I'm pregnant. Marcus and I are going to have a baby. The joy in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt my own heart swell with happiness. Oh, Victoria, that's wonderful news. Congratulations to both of you. There's something else, she continued. We've been talking about the kind of values we want to teach our child. About money, about wealth, about what really matters in life. And we both agreed that we want to raise them the way you raised Marcus. Not flaunting wealth, not feeling entitled, but understanding that money is a tool and a responsibility. That's a beautiful goal, I said softly. We want them to know their grandmother, really know her. To learn from you. To understand that true wealth is about wisdom and purpose and making a positive impact, not about designer labels and expensive cars. I'd love nothing more than to be part of their life, I said. And to share whatever wisdom I've accumulated over the years. We also want to ask you something, Victoria said, her voice becoming more hesitant. We know it's traditional to use family names, and we're planning to name him David if it's a boy, after Marcus's father. But if it's a girl, we'd like to name her Margaret. After you. If that's okay with you. I couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the gesture. Victoria, I would be deeply honored. 9 months later, I held my granddaughter Margaret Rose Harrison for the first time. She was perfect, tiny and beautiful, with Marcus's eyes and Victoria's determination already visible in her fierce grip. As I rocked her gently, I thought about the legacy I would leave her. Not just the financial wealth, though that would be there when she needed it. But more importantly, the understanding that true wealth comes from wisdom, from kindness, from using whatever resources you have to make a positive difference in the world. I thought about how a single dinner, where I was mocked for my small investment, had become the turning point for so much growth and positive change. How Victoria's condescension had transformed into genuine friendship and shared purpose. How Marcus's surprised discovery of his mother's financial acumen had deepened our relationship. How Richard's revelation had opened doors to meaningful work that aligned with my values. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift. It reveals who people really are when they think you can't help them or hurt them. It creates opportunities for teaching and growth. And sometimes, it leads to moments of transformation that change lives in ways no one could have predicted. Little Margaret Rose stirred in my arms, making small contented sounds. I looked at her perfect face and made her a silent promise. I would teach her, as I had tried to teach her parents, that wealth without wisdom is meaningless. That appearances can deceive. That kindness matters more than status. That using your resources to help others is the highest purpose money can serve. You're going to do great things, little one, I whispered to her. Not because of the money you'll inherit, but because of the values you'll learn. The world needs more people who understand that true wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what you have. Victoria appeared in the doorway, watching us with a soft smile. She loves you already. Look how peaceful she is in your arms. She's perfect, Victoria. You and Marcus did well. We had a good example to follow, Victoria said, coming to sit beside me. Margaret, I want to thank you again for your patience with me. For not holding my arrogance against me. For teaching me what really matters. You taught yourself, dear. I just provided some perspective. You did the hard work of changing and growing. The scholarship fund has already helped 12 students go to college, Victoria said. 3 of them are studying finance and business. Keisha is one of them. She's thriving. That's wonderful. Your father would be so proud. I hope so. I hope he'd be proud of the person I'm becoming. He would be, I assured her. Not because you learned about impact investing or wealth management, but because you learned compassion and humility. Those are the qualities that truly matter. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, creating patterns of light and shadow in the nursery, I held my granddaughter and felt a deep sense of contentment. My small investment that Victoria had once mocked had indeed revealed truth, but not in the way anyone had expected. The real investment wasn't in green energy systems or any of the other companies I'd backed over the years. The real investment was in people, in relationships, in values and wisdom passed from one generation to the next. Those investments paid dividends that couldn't be measured in dollars or calculated by any financial formula. They paid dividends in growth, in understanding, in kindness, and in the legacy of wisdom that would be passed down to this tiny person sleeping peacefully in my arms. And that, I thought as I gently kissed Margaret Rose's forehead, was the best investment of all. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, comment, like and share your